Hi Erin, thanks for the video questions, and this is my video follow-up for your questions, and hopefully I answer most of those questions, but if not, feel free to fire back another video. I do understand that healthcare is funded by the federal government and regulated and administered by the provincial government for the most part. I don't think that any of my proposals really infringe on that. I proposed a 25% salary increase for general practitioners, and this would be across the board, and we already see variation in salary caps depending on the province that they practice in. So this is just increasing that cap that's province specific. I also proposed $100 in additional funding for things that aren't currently covered by the healthcare system. Because we do see variation in what's covered across the province. For example, Ontario doesn't cover optometry anymore, whereas other provinces still do. That $100 in additional funding for services that aren't currently covered, it would be up to the province what they decided to include in that. So, once again, I don't think that really infringes on the federal-provincial relationship. The Made in Canada brand, I do understand that Stephen Harper is working towards this, but until it's actually achieved, I think that it's still an issue that I will continue to address. I think that beyond just identifying whether or not something is made in Canada versus packaged in Canada, that we also need stricter labeling for imported products. This is especially true for food, because especially with packaged food, you can have ingredients from all over the world, and I think Canadian consumers should know where most of their ingredients are coming from so that they can make educated choices when they're buying food products. In regards to the environment, I didn't outline a plan to the detail that I probably should have. I was restricted by the 5-minute limit. My environmental plan includes increased funding for environmental research. I am well aware that Europe's way ahead of us, but I don't think that that should influence our decision on whether or not we should be making that investment. I think it's really important to develop the technology and drive the price down of that technology as the research and the technology develops. I also think that it's important that the government offers incentives for people to go green. For instance, in Ontario, if you buy an energy efficient furnace, you're offered money back for that, and that's government funded. And it's rewarding you for making an energy efficient choice. I think that the same should go if you decide to, put solar panels on your roof and power your entire house that way. I think that the government needs to be offering big tax incentives for people because the technology is still really, really expensive and people can't afford, to put solar panels on their roof. And I think if the government was to step in a little bit and take some of that burden off people, you'd see more people doing it. I think ultimately that would end up driving the prices down because as more people were purchasing the technology because they could afford to, you get increased demand, increased output, and the technology would develop a lot quicker than it currently is and ultimately drive the price down. I think that's pretty much everything. I have a couple questions for you. You talk about the importance of skilled workers, which I completely agree with. We need more skilled workers, but you didn't really address how you're going to draw more skilled workers into the educational system. So I was just wondering, what incentives you're going to offer people to get into skilled trades right now that aren't already being provided. I'm also curious, you mentioned increased incentives for parents to invest in their education. I completely agree that it's super important for parents to invest in their children's education, but what about the middle class and lower class families that are already, struggling to pay their mortgage and pay their credit cards, and with the rising cost of education, I just don't think it's realistic to ask for them to, offer more than they already are. So I'm just wondering what incentives you propose that will help take some of that financial burden off the students. You also mentioned renegotiating NAFTA. I think that the renegotiation of NAFTA is ultimately, it's going to happen. I'm just wondering what your stance is on this. How do you think it should be renegotiated in Canada's best interest? You also mentioned regulating credit issues and that we need to be doing more to regulate credit issues, but I'm just wondering what you really propose that we can be doing that we're not already doing. I think personally that Canada's really, we have really strict regulation already, and that's why that we've fared as well as we have in the current economic crisis compared to some other countries. So I was just curious, what else we can be doing. And finally, this is kind of more of a personal question because I know that you're going through for something related to the environment. You mentioned upgrading highways and that somehow that will cause increased fuel efficiency for vehicles. So I'm just wondering if you could elaborate on this a little bit, because it's something I know absolutely nothing about. So it would be really interesting to hear the relationship between highway upgrades and increased fuel efficiency. I thought you had a great video, a great platform. You really posed some great questions for me, and I had fun answering them. Hopefully I fully answered them, but if you have leftover questions, feel free to fire back another video, and I look forward to your video response.